Hi everyone, Happy New Year. In this video, I wanted to share with you some books on prehistory, and this video is in line with Historathon 2023. So if you haven't seen my video or my co-host videos, Historathon 2023 is a year-long reading event starting today until December 31st, 2023, where we really encourage readers to read more history, particularly if you wouldn't normally pick up a history book. So this event was created by Vin over at Revenant Reads, and as I say in this video, I really want to share with you some prehistory book recommendations for those of you who don't normally read about this topic. The reason I'm sharing these books with you is because for the first quarter of the year, January to March, for this reading event, we'll be focusing on prehistory to 500 AD. So I am very passionate about prehistory. This is what I went to school for. I love learning about ancient humans, extinct humans, our ancestors in our hominin family tree. And I realized that for a general audience, it is very, very difficult to find books on this topic. It's not necessarily as widely available as other periods of history. So what is prehistory? Prehistory is just very simplistically defined as anything that has happened before written records. So from the first evidence that we have of manufacturing tools to, when we have evidence of written records. I will just say that it's not like all across the globe there was prehistory and then there was history. Different societies across the globe adopted writing at different points in time. So even you could have neighbors, societal neighbors that were already dabbling in writing, whereas their neighbors very nearby actually weren't. So yeah, just bearing that in mind, prehistory and history, there isn't a very clear-cut divide there. But when I mentioned the first stone tool, or even the first tool manufacturer, stone tools were most likely not the first tools that were manufactured. The earliest evidence that we have of tools or human modification of the environment for tools is 3.3 million years ago, and this is known as the Lomequian industry. So we have evidence of stone tools that weren't naturally modified to get a very sharp edge for use as stone tools. Before that, the earliest evidence that we had came from the Olduvai Gorge in the form of stone tools as well. So yes, 3.3 million years ago is when we're really starting. And I do have some books here that go quite far back in time, millions of years. And the first book I would like to share with you is Almost Human by Lee Berger. Lee Berger is a paleoanthropologist originally from the States who works in South Africa. And this is half memoir, half discussion of some of the discoveries that he has made. And one of the discoveries that he made was very recent. Was it 2000? I can't remember the date, but when this discovery was made, it rocked the paleoanthropological and archaeological world. Essentially, we have this understanding that humans, Homo sapiens, should there's a certain threshold that has to be met to be considered to be a species of the Homo family. So that includes being completely bipedal. So the skeletal features, the skeletal morphology has to be indicative of that. So you can tell by the pelvis, the shape of the femur, the shape of the foot, of course, the positioning of the foramen magnum, which is at the hole where your spinal cord inserts into your head. All of those things would indicate bipedalism. Also, one of the other factors was having a cranial capacity of over, I want to say, like 1,000 cubic centimeters. And that is a certain indication for a certain level of intelligence that has to be met in order to be considered a part of the Homo family. And you might be thinking I'm taking a while to get to the point, but as I say, this discovery of Homo naledi was so spectacular because this species, Homo naledi, had all of the features of bipedalism and all of the other skeletal morphologies that indicated that they were relatively similar to Homo sapiens, but they also had they had a much smaller cranial capacity than Homo sapiens or any of our other predecessors like Homo erectus or Homo neanderthalensis. So it was such an incredible discovery, and I do recommend this book because he also talks about one of his other discoveries and why the other human or extinct human hominin, I should say, didn't make it into the Homo species. For that reason. And it's just really exciting. The cave, Rising Star Cave, where they discovered Homo naledi, it could only be reached by finding really, really small framed archaeologists because they literally had to crawl through the tightest holes in the cave. I think they even called it like a Superman crawl because they had to outstretch their arms in front of them and in the back of them just so they could squeeze into the space. And another reason why this cave is also fascinating is because there, in the chamber where Homo naledi was found, there is no other evidence of any other type of species. So normally when you're at an archaeological site, you have to document every bone that you find, whether or not it's significant. So if you find rodent bones, if you find any sort of other zooarchaeological remains, like bison, for instance, you'd have to document that. They didn't find any of that. So one of the indications is, could this be a burial chamber? And could potentially this mean that there was some sort of ritual going on? That would be a very huge, that has so much significance because, again, like I say, this species, while it is very young, I think it's around no more than half a millennia. I think it's like 200,000 years old when I last checked. The fact that it has a much smaller cranial capacity is quite significant for the things that they were doing, if that indeed happened. So yes, I do highly recommend this book. It's written in a way that is digestible for a general audience. You don't have to know a thing about paleoanthropology because it's explained in here. Very exciting for that reason. Next on the list, this is my favorite book of, did this come out in 2020 or 2021? Regardless, this has got to be my favorite book on ancient humans. This is by a very well-renowned, well-respected individual in the field of archaeology, Tom Hyam. I think his title is, he's the director of the Radiocarbon Accelerator Unit at Oxford University. And he does a spectacular job of compiling all of the different human species that existed around 50,000 years ago. Homo sapiens weren't the only species of human that were around at that time. So it's a very interesting look at how we interacted with these other extinct species, how we interbred with them, how DNA evidence is really showing how these other species' DNA affected our genome. Really fascinating stuff. Absolutely love this book. Again, it's part memoir of the discoveries that have been found, including the Denisovans, and also part educational. So I'm taking a long time here, so I'll have to move quicker. But there's two other books that deserve special mention. I particularly focus on Neanderthals, and we've got two books here. So Kindred by Rebecca Ragg-Sykes, I always pronounce her name wrong, and The Invaders by Pat Shipman. So at the time that Rebecca wrote this book, Kindred, this was the most up-to-date compendium of Neanderthal sites, artifacts, and a look at their cognition, their cognitive capacities, their capacity for ritual, their capacity for empathy. Some people I've read reviews said they found this a bit preachy, but I didn't necessarily get that. I do recommend this book. And then, ooh, my book's nearly toppled. Another book that I really enjoyed, as I say, is by Pat Shipman, and this is called The Invaders. Pat Shipman she's a, I want to say a paleo biologist. She's got a biology background, and she does a lot of paleozooarchaeology. So she looks at the relationship between humans and Neanderthals from a very biological background, looking at us not as necessarily humans, although that factor is very much involved, and how our characteristics, both Neanderthals and humans, played a part in our evolution. But ultimately, she has an argument as to why Neanderthals were outcompeted by humans, and this involves dogs. I didn't necessarily buy into all of the arguments or evidence that she had in here, but I still thought it was a very compelling argument, a very strong argument, and again, it's just very exciting. So yeah. And then finally, this is, I would say, not for beginners. This just deserves special mention. If you want to really challenge yourself, The Dawn of the Everything, A New History of Humanity by David Graeber and David Wengrow. This is sort of a critique at 19th century understandings of this trajectory of humanity and civilization, and just all of the really racist ideas that were going about, and why humans adopted civilization readily. This looks at a lot of ethnographic and historical evidence for cultures that existed without really trying to adopt civilization or agriculture or sedentary society, and how they persisted, and what their reasonings were for that, and how they managed to have very enriching lives for that reason. And David Wengrow, I've just got to say, was the head of my department when I did my master's, and I really enjoyed his teachings. I think David Graeber, I haven't really read much of him. I know he's a well-known anthropologist, though. So yeah, that's that. And then one I gotta say I haven't read yet. This will be on my TBR in January. I got this for Christmas from my husband, is Buried by Alice Roberts. Alice Roberts is a very popular and well-known archaeological communicator and educator, especially in the UK. She's got a lot of television programs, which I enjoy. And this looks at the history of Britain based on skeletal evidence and focuses on the first millennia. So yes, those are the books that I plan on reading, and those are just some of the books that I'd like to recommend if any of you do want to get interested in prehistory. All of these books that I recommended, maybe bar The Dawn of Everything, are very easily digestible. You don't have to know anything about archaeology or paleoanthropology to know to follow along, because all of the authors make a very they do a really good job of explaining the key concepts so you can follow along. And I think that's what the field of archaeology really needs. As I say, it's not a field that is as accessible as history. And I think that needs to change, really, because there's so many exciting things that happen in prehistory. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think, and if you decide to pick up some prehistory books, I'd really be interested to know what they are. You know, I don't even care if you pick up a book by Graham Hancock after you watch his Netflix show. I don't necessarily agree with what he says, but I would very much like to know what you think about it. So yeah, if it gets you reading prehistory or even history, I would like to know. So yes, anyways, have a very happy new year, and I'll see you next time. Bye.